Greetings, my name is Jorge TORRES-GIERBOLINI, and today I will be presenting carbon ash deposits in Peñuelas, Puerto Rico. A little bit of a background information in terms of the situation that is currently ongoing in Peñuelas, Puerto Rico. The depositing of carbon ashes in an industrial landfill in Peñuelas has led to social and economic concerns by residents of the area. These deposits are being conducted by Applied Energy System, also known as AES, which is based out of Guayama, Puerto Rico. The local and federal governments have established public policies against these deposits of the carbon ashes in terms of Law 40 of 2017 and other well-known judicial reviews and orders by appealing courts within the Puerto Rican system. The Environmental Protection Agency has come to the conclusion that carbon ashes could lead to catastrophic health concerns. This presentation will be divided in 5 parts: background information, primary research done in Peñuelas, Puerto Rico, which was an interview with one of the prominent leaders of the group that is protesting these deposits, secondary research, which was conducted by media outlets, Puerto Rico's local government and federal government responses to the protest in Peñuelas, and the conclusion to see what it's a sort of synthesis as to what could possibly come about this situation. Applied Energy Systems burns coal in order to produce electrical energy for the Puerto Rico Electric Power Authority, which is the monopoly that pretty much energizes the entirety of Puerto Rico. AES was ordered to stop depositing carbon ashes by the judicial branch of Puerto Rico, and were forced to dispose of these ashes in Dominican Republic. Now, this judicial order was given before the 21st century, but in Dominican Republic, AES was also forced to stop depositing ashes known as rock ash after a civil lawsuit by the government against AES. In the beginning of the 21st century, AES started to deposit rock ash in the jurisdiction of Puerto Rico. The EPA and the Environmental Quality Board of Puerto Rico decided that rock ash was not detrimental to humans, although it was composed of toxic chemicals such as arsenic and cadmium. With this new regulation in place, AES was allowed to deposit these ashes in public landfills. Protests by residents of Peñuelas. Protesters have blocked off the Puerto Rico Highway No. 2 in order to stop trucks that were on the way to deposit these ashes in Peñuelas. On more than one instance, numerous arrests were made and charges of disorderly conduct and civil disobedience were brought to the protesters at the time of arraignment. Some of the most violent manifestations took place in the summer of 2017. A large amount of criticism was made toward Governor Ricardo Rosselló because he would not back the people of Peñuelas and decided to stand with a large corporation like AES. Many prominent political figures have taken part in these protests. María de Lourdes Santiago was arrested during one of the manifestations in the summer of 2017. The Tayaboa landfill, which is another name for the landfill that is located in Peñuelas. AES started to deposit waste in the Tayaboa landfill in 2015. 125,000 tons of solid waste have been deposited in this landfill throughout years. A ban of the depositing of carbon ashes has been placed on any company that utilizes the Tayaboa landfill. Some judges have ruled that a perimeter should be established in order to examine the contents of the waste that are transported on dump trucks. The Board of Environmental Quality has been trying to establish new procedures in order to manage carbon ashes and the depositing of these ashes. However, the depositing of waste in this landfill is still taking place without proper testing of the deposits. Primary research. I conducted an interview with one of the leaders of the group Movimiento en contra de la ceniza de carbón, in order to understand the situation and how people are trying to resolve it. During this interview, the prominent leader stated that AES was depositing a new form of ash called Agremax. The EPA concluded that Agremax was composed of 80% fly ash, which is considered to be highly toxic. The prominent leader also stated that the Tayaboa landfill was the first landfill that had tons of toxic carbon ashes deposited. They are angry that state troopers are protecting AES's illegal deposits instead of protecting the residents of Peñuelas from toxic chemicals. And the leader also mentioned that this movement is not based off politics, rather off of the respect that is needed towards environmental and human safety. I personally went to Peñuelas and saw the transportation of these toxic waste through dump trucks, and during this transportation of solid waste, there were no altercations between law enforcement and protesters. This was a pacific manifestation. Many of the protesters, however, just wanted their demands to be heard and did not abruptly go into the violence. Instead of having manifestations that were violent, like the ones in the summer of 2017, they stuck to pacific protests and asking why are they still depositing these solid waste without the proper lab field test. Some of the older generations are trying to protect the environment for generations to come. And I spoke with some residents, and they still remember the day that the oil refinery in Peñuelas was operational. Because you can see it on the horizon, right across the highway. There are still the giant components of the oil refinery facility, just about 1,000 feet away from where this protest is going on against carbon ash deposits. Some of the secondary research that I happened to stumble upon were reports conducted by prominent media outlets, such as El Nuevo Dia and Primera Hora. Many outlets have been reporting about the situation in Peñuelas since the beginning. Numerous reports regarding the plea of the cancellation of the government's contract with AES have been proven true by leaders of the protest. Negative opinions regarding the uncompliant actions of the Board of Environmental Quality in terms of field tests on the contents of the landfill have been widespread by the protesters, by some media outlets, by political analysts. And there's still another landfill in Humacao, Puerto Rico, and it is believed that AES is depositing solid waste in this landfill without the proper field test, just like they are doing in the Tayaboa landfill. Manifestations against the transportation of these wastes to Peñuelas have sometimes started around 4 a.m. During Hurricane Maria, AES was criticized for having a large amount of these ashes uncovered in the treatment plant in Guayama, Puerto Rico, which is where they produce the electrical energy for the Puerto Rican Power Authority. The main concerns of the carbon ash deposits are that they have some environmental impacts that include air pollution, soil contamination, and groundwater pollution. Some of the health concerns range from the possible exposure to radiation to the high rates of cancer patients within the area compared to the rest of Puerto Rico. Some reports of violations of human rights and loss of landscape have impacted residents of Peñuela. An ongoing concern is the lack of toxic waste treatment by AES. And if the depositing of these ashes continues, there will be more acts of disapproval, such as blockades, strikes, or petitions to the local government to cease and cancel the contract with AES. Puerto Rico's local government and federal government responses. Some state legislators have called upon the Board of Environmental Quality and the Secretary of Health to investigate whether the landfill is contaminated with toxic waste. If toxic waste were to be found in the landfill, these findings would be used in cases in the Supreme Court of Puerto Rico. Not to mention, these findings would enact legislation that would prohibit any form of depositing in the Tayaboa landfill. Numerous protesters have voiced the concern that the regulations in place have too many loopholes and a rather large amount of ambiguous vocabulary. Local officials have been trying to implement a new public policy that would call for cleaner and more expanded recycling of solid waste, such as the carbon ashes. Law 40 of 2017 bans the depositing of coal ashes in any landfills within the Puerto Rico jurisdiction. The legislation specifically mentioned the fly ash contaminant, which happens to be one of the most toxic ashes. However, AES continues to deposit tons of ashes in Peñuelas landfill without a 100% assurance that carbon ashes aren't being deposited. The Environmental Protection Agency insists that the ashes being deposited are not an imminent risk to the humans or to the environment. The EPA has stated that fly ash could lead to brain damage, thyroid problems, and maybe even cancer. The EPA plans to shut down a large amount of public landfills within Puerto Rico because most of them do not meet environmental and operational standards. Now, to bring this presentation to its conclusion, here's a brief synthesis as to what I believe should be done in Peñuelas, Puerto Rico in order to subsidize the situation with the carbon ashes. The conflict between protesters and AES has subsidized, and there haven't been any large-scale manifestations within the past few months. The closing of the Tayaboa landfill still hasn't begun because the government is trying to see if it is fiscally prudent to open up another landfill within Puerto Rico. And this is in regards to the economic situation and crisis that is ongoing within Puerto Rico. And what will AES do with the ashes if they are banned from depositing any form of solid waste in Tayaboa? Will they just move on to another landfill in Puerto Rico and deposit these ashes without the proper field test in order to make sure that they are not carbon ashes? Or will they just move on to another country and deposit the ashes in that jurisdiction? Or will they just keep the ashes within their facility in Guayama, Puerto Rico?